Emma Hart did not look back when she stepped out of the apartment for the last time. She didn't pause to take in the familiar hallway, didn't allow herself a final glance at the home she had shared for 10 years. She knew that if she looked back, she might lose her nerve. The suitcase in her hand felt heavier than it should have, not because of the clothes and keepsakes it carried, but because of the weight of every silent dinner, every cutting remark, every carefully disguised insult she had endured during her marriage to Daniel. To outsiders, Daniel was charming, polite at dinner parties, quick to laugh, generous with compliments in public. But behind closed doors, his words were sharp enough to slice through her self-worth, and his cold silences could freeze her for days. Emma had once believed marriage was meant to be a partnership. Instead, hers had become a slow suffocation. That morning, while he still slept, she had slipped out of bed, grabbed her already packed suitcase from under the bed frame, and walked out. No note. No goodbye. Only the sound of the apartment door clicking shut behind her. The airport was a blur of movement, people rushing, flight announcements echoing, the smell of coffee drifting from every corner. Emma's ticket was for Flight 712 to Chicago, where her sister lived. She had dreamed of this escape for months. Chicago meant safety, a fresh start, and someone who would hold her without judgment. She checked in, went through security, and joined the boarding line. But her hands trembled as she clutched her passport and ticket, her mind replaying memories she was trying to leave behind. She was so deep in thought that she barely noticed when the gate attendant scanned her ticket and waved her through. She didn't notice the number above the gate wasn't the one printed on her boarding pass. She didn't notice that she was walking toward the wrong plane. It wasn't until she was seated, buckled in, and the captain's voice came over the speakers that she realized what had happened. "Welcome aboard Flight 721 to Seattle," the voice said, cheerful and oblivious. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. Seattle? She was supposed to be heading east, not west. She fumbled with her seatbelt, half rising to find a flight attendant, but before she could, the man sitting beside her turned his head. "You okay?" he asked. Emma froze. The man was in his mid-30s, with warm olive skin and dark, steady eyes. There was a quietness about him, as if he carried his own stillness like a shield against the chaos of the world. His voice was calm, low, and unexpectedly soothing. I'm on the wrong flight," she stammered. His lips curved into the faintest smile. "Maybe it's the right one," he said softly, almost like it was meant more for himself than for her. The engines roared beneath them, and the plane began to taxi down the runway. Emma's chest tightened as she realized it was too late to get off. She sank back into her seat, gripping the armrest. His name was Lucas. They began talking, first about trivial things, how bad airport coffee always was, how the weather had been unusually warm for winter, but slowly, the conversation slipped into deeper waters. Emma didn't plan to tell him about her marriage. She had learned to hide those wounds carefully. But something about Lucas's presence made her feel as if she could breathe, and the words began to spill out. She told him about Daniel's manipulations, about the years of walking on eggshells, about how she had started to believe she was unlovable, that maybe Daniel was right when he said no one else would ever want her. She spoke in halting sentences, afraid of saying too much, but every time she faltered, Lucas just listened, really listened, without judgment or interruption. When she finally fell silent, Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Sometimes, he said quietly, the universe changes your route so you won't go back the way you came. She didn't know why, but the words lodged deep in her chest. She turned to look out the window, watching the clouds drift beneath them, and thought about how strange it was that she was here, on this plane, beside this man she had never met. When they landed in Seattle, Lucas offered to walk her to the customer service desk so she could change her ticket to Chicago. But as they moved through the busy terminal, he hesitated. "I don't want to overstep," he said carefully, "but I run a non-profit here in Seattle. It's for women who are starting over, housing, job training, counseling. If you need somewhere safe, even just for a night, we can help." Emma's instinct was to refuse. She had spent years being told that accepting help was weakness, that relying on others made her pathetic. But there was something in Lucas's voice that felt different, steady, genuine, without a trace of pity. Against every old habit, she said yes. The apartment she stayed in that night was small but full of light, with a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon. Other women lived there too, women who had been through their own storms. They welcomed her with easy smiles and no probing questions. In the mornings, they made breakfast together. In the evenings, they sat in the living room and shared stories, sometimes sad, sometimes funny. For the first time in years, Emma laughed until her sides hurt. But peace doesn't come without shadows. On her third night, her phone lit up with Daniel's number. She froze, her pulse thundering in her ears. Just seeing his name made her stomach knot. She told Lucas about it later, half expecting him to tell her to pick up. "You can ignore it," he said gently. "Or you can answer, but you decide how the story goes this time." Emma stared at her phone until it stopped ringing. Then, without another thought, she blocked the number. 2 weeks passed. Her sister flew in to visit, worried but hopeful. "I was scared for you," she told Emma, "but you look alive again." And Emma realized she was. She had found part-time work in a local bookstore, started therapy, and even signed up for a photography class, a dream she had buried long ago because Daniel had mocked it. Lucas became not just a friend but a quiet reminder that kindness still existed in the world, that not all men used their voices to wound. On the night before she moved into her own apartment, she stood with Lucas on a pier, the wind cold but the sky streaked with gold as the sun sank into the horizon. "You know," she said, her voice almost lost to the sound of the water, "boarding the wrong plane was the best mistake I've ever made." Lucas smiled faintly. Maybe it wasn't a mistake at all. Months later, Emma would share her story with other women at the nonprofit, how she had run from a toxic marriage, boarded the wrong flight, and ended up finding safety and hope in the most unexpected place. She would tell them that sometimes the road you think is a detour is actually the path you were meant to take. And she would always end with the same words. "You are not trapped. You can change the flight."